My name is Todd Meisch. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, and I very much appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to join us here today. Great lineup. Want to go ahead and introduce, first of all, Lieutenant Governor Evelyn Sanguinetti. Evelyn has just chaired a task force that the governor talked about in his State of the State, something the Illinois Chamber is very interested in, which is consolidating and making local governments more accountable and more efficient. So she's done a great job with that task force, as well as a lot of other things. Military affairs is a very important issue. Obviously, here in Springfield, we've got those military assets, and the Lieutenant Governor has been a real leader on those issues as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way and turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Evelyn Sanguinetti.
Thank you. Good evening. Buenas noches. Sorry to give you my back over here. It's so great to be here in Springfield tonight. We're going to be talking about some reforms today, but the one I'm going to be talking about is one that I've been working on over the past year. Back in February, the governor issued an executive order last February because he knew that there were some problems going on in Springfield that we really needed to attack right away. So we're number one at one thing. Do you guys know what that is? We have the most units of government than any other state in the union. We're almost approaching 7,000 units of government. So by way of comparison, we look to the Lone Star State of Texas. They have 1,800 units of government less than we do here. Here we have almost 7,000. So that sounds very duplicative and overburdensome, yes, but then we have the factor that our property taxes, that's the second highest in the country. So that's very problematic too. And Bruce Rauner, of course, saw this firsthand and developed a task force by way of executive order, and I was honored to act as chair of the task force. As a matter of fact, many of you here this evening helped out a lot through testimony and being part of the task force. Throughout the course of the year, 24 members on a bipartisan basis heard testimony, and we worked hand in hand with Northern Illinois University because they needed to crunch some data too. Now, the whole report on consolidation was one piece, but the other piece was on unfunded mandates, and it was the first report of its kind in Illinois history. Now, unfunded mandates, you folks know full well what that is. That's when big government tells little government what to do, but they don't give you the money in which to carry out these new rules. So we took a look at all the unfunded mandates to see where we could streamline as well. Our report went out, and it's been met very positively by many communities. As a matter of fact, last Friday we met with Naperville. They took our task force report and used it as a tool to start having discussions in their own community as to what was the best fit to streamline and deliver more efficient, effective government to the community of their own. So that's what we look to all of you residents now, to go to your communities, take that task force report, and discuss ways in which to streamline government. In the meantime, this task force report will not collect us. We've put some batteries in it. We've turned 8 of our recommendations into bills, and we're going to make those bills law in the future because that's what Illinois needs at this time. So without further ado, that's one of the components we have on reform, and Bruce Rauner, our governor, will be talking about the rest of the components today. Thank you so much for having me, and Bruce Rauner, your governor of the state of Illinois.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. It's great to be back home in Springfield. We've been on the road the last 5 days around the state. We just came in from Bloomington. We were in the Quad Cities earlier today, Rockford this morning, and we've been all over the state. We want to get everybody an update on what's going on. There's a lot going on. And we're going to have a conversation tonight, and I want this to be fun and informative. I know we're going to do Q&A. That's my favorite thing, so have some questions ready. I know there's a few that have been submitted, but I hope we can do some where you raise your hands, too. That's my favorite part. A ton going on in Springfield here in our state government. And there's a lot on the line. Basically, right now, there's a titanic struggle for the future of our state. That's what's going on. The fundamental future direction of our state. That's what we're battling about. The question is, are we going to stay on the trajectory that we've been on, which is one where we've been deficit spending, unbalanced budgets, more borrowing, more taxing, more job losses, more reduction in family incomes, more cuts to school funding, and ongoing conflicts of interest in government? Are we going to stay on this track, or are we going to go in a new, more positive direction? more economic growth, more value for taxpayers, more support for our schools, more government that's working for you and the people of the state together? That's a question. How are we going to do that? The supermajority in the legislature doesn't want to talk about changing direction. They purely want to talk about raising taxes. And they have created deficit spending for years, and they've said, Governor, and they passed a budget with a $5 billion deficit in it last year, and they've said, Governor, what we want to do is not discuss any reform proposals. We want you to raise taxes to cover this spending. I'm sorry, that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. I've said that I will work on tax reform as part of a grand compromise, and that can include some new revenues. I'm an anti-tax guy and a limited government guy, so that's hard for me to even, be willing to talk about, but I will talk about it in the spirit of compromise. But we need structural reform to grow our economy. And we've got to change the conversation. The legislature, the majority in the legislature, wants the conversation to be either about more taxes or fewer programs and cut services. That's the trade-off. More taxes or fewer services. And that's not the trade-off. We don't have to make that the trade-off. We can have more growth and less cost of government bureaucracy, so we can have the money for our social services, our human services in our schools, and we can have the revenue for balanced budgets without big tax hikes. That should be the conversation. Growth and government cost reduction, bending the cost curve of government, not rates going up, services going down. That's got to be the conversation. And I've asked that. So far, the Speaker has declined to really engage on that. And so we're at an impasse. It's very frustrating. It's outrageous to me, just unconscionable to me that we don't have a budget. 8 months now coming into the fiscal year. It's outrageous. We're not funding our MAP grants, and I'm a big advocate for scholarships for low-income kids. I've personally donated millions to that effort myself. Our low-income kids deserve to have scholarships to go to school. Our human services deserve to be funded. Our developmentally disabled, our recipients of home health care, they should be funded. Our universities deserve to be funded. What we're doing now is unconscionable. And I've said to the legislature, they do have a supermajority. If they really thought that with a tax hike was the appropriate answer, they could do it. And they won't even be willing to vote on it for a simple majority. They just won't even talk about it. Because they know, a huge portion of the supermajority knows just a tax hike alone is not the right answer. It's not the right answer. And they can tell, we did a tax hike in 2011, big one, and that stepped down mostly, fortunately, which is good. But while that tax hike was in place, our unfunded pension liability went up $28 billion, not down. Our school funding got cut, it didn't go up. More jobs accelerated leaving the state, and our economic growth declined even more than it's been. And we barely made a dent in our unpaid bills. Tax hike's not the answer. We need growth and structural reform. We got to get at the causes of our ongoing deficit spending. And this is what's amazing. People say to me, we just raise the taxes to cover the deficit. We used to have balanced budgets, and we'll get back to that. I've looked at the math. I can't find a year in the last 30 where we've really had a balanced budget. Ever. Ever. We borrow and don't talk about it. We borrow for infrastructure and use some of it for operations. We don't pay our bills, which is borrowing from our vendors at 12%. And we make unaffordable, unsustainable offers to our government employees for their retirement pensions, and then we don't pay in. And let's be clear, when we don't pay in the actuarially required calculated amount every year, the part we don't pay in is borrowing at 8%. It is borrowing at whatever the pension assets return on average over time. And that has been about 8%, give or take, for a long time. So we have been borrowing at 8% for decades and not telling anybody. Politicians love doing that because it's the best form of borrowing. Nobody really knows. And there's no annual cash charge for interest on the borrowing. It just balloons in the pension obligation. And that's what's been going on. So these pension ramps that we've been doing, that's borrowing at 8%. We've been dishonest with our voters and with our taxpayers. And it's come home to roost. And we got to get at the structural causes for that, or it's just going to continue. And if we just raise taxes to cover it up, we're going to go down the road. And then we're going to look like Connecticut and New Jersey, and I could go down a handful of states that are in deep yogurt because they haven't dealt with the structural problems. GE, who I tried to recruit to Illinois, and Illinois was where they wanted to come. GE relocated because they left Connecticut because Connecticut did what a lot of people want me to do. Connecticut just decided to paper over their problems again by hiking taxes again. And GE said, enough of this, we're out of here. And they wanted to come here. In fact, they waited to make their decision because I said, I don't know if I can deliver reforms by September. I tried. That was when they wanted to make their decision. I said, could you give me until January because I think maybe I could deliver some reforms. And they said, if you can do even part of your reform agenda. January came. I couldn't deliver. I said, we're out here. They went to Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is not the most business-friendly state in the country. It's not exactly a conservative free enterprise bastion, but they've taken on workers' comp reform, and their workers' comp now costs are average. They've taken on collective bargaining in government, and they've taken things like health care out of collective bargaining, saving hundreds of millions of dollars for their taxpayers. They've taken on major school reform to hold their schools more accountable for student growth. They've done a lot of things that we should do, and that is a democratically controlled state. We can do this. And as I say every day, why can't we have the heart, the social services support network of Massachusetts, while the economic muscle of Texas? We're totally capable of that. I'm a competitive son of a gun, and I believe in a strong, growing economy. We can compete with Texas. There's no reason we can't. Some people say to me, Governor, we shouldn't try to compete with Texas and Indiana or Tennessee. They're right-to-work states, and they're anti-employee, and they hurt employees, and we shouldn't try to compete with them. That's just fundamentally false. It's fundamentally wrong. Texas, it is a right-to-work state, Texas, and in theory, we're supposed to be pro-employee, pro-union, all that stuff. Texas factory workers make more than Illinois factory workers. Why? Because Texas is growing. Companies are competing to hire employees. That's what pushes wages up. And if you adjust for the cost of living, Texas factory workers make way more than Illinois workers because the cost of living there is so much less than here. And if you do adjust for cost of living, factory workers in Indiana and Wisconsin make more than factory workers here, and those are right-to-work states. And in the spirit of compromise, I've taken right-to-work off the table. I'll say, okay, off the table. I'm trying to get a compromise. I'll take it off the table. But the reality is we need to compete. And so we're the worst or among the worst on workers' comp. We're among the worst on property taxes. We're the worst on education. We're dead last, 50 out of 50. We're dead last for state support for education. And on good things, we're last. And on bad things, we're a leader. And what I've decided to start doing is I'll say, let's be average. Let's be average. Let's be average on workers' comp. Let's be average on property taxes. Let's be average on liability insurance costs. If we do that, we'll win because we've got better people in a better location, better infrastructure, more strategic assets in Illinois than these other states do. And I can't wait to kick Texas' tail if we get our reforms done. I'm going to travel the nation and the world recruiting companies to come right here to Central Illinois, all over the state. Companies want to be here, but they want to see that we have a balance. And business executives, they're not dummies on finance. They can look at Illinois and see that we've never had balanced budgets. If you're going to put $1 billion in the ground, are you going to put it in Illinois? When you see the financial mismanagement of our state year after year after year? No, you're not. If we change that, though, I guarantee you very quickly we can have a lot of companies coming here. I've talked to many. I've been out there trying to recruit, and they're ready to come. Companies want to come to Illinois. They're ready to come. But we got to show that there's a balance of interest between the insiders in government and the taxpayers. That's what we're working on. And that's what our 4 reforms about. We're trying to reform government. We're trying to reform politics. We're trying to reform our economic competitiveness, our business climate, and we're trying to reform education. It's a lot, but our people deserve a lot. People of Illinois are the best in the world. I love them, and I want to deliver that results. On education, I want to increase state support for education a lot. K-12, early childhood, community colleges, a lot. And I want to put disproportionately more in low-income districts and in rural districts because they don't have the resources, and every child deserves a great education even if they come from a low-income household. I want more education funding, and I want to create 2 tracks for education, a 4-year college professional track and a technical vocational track, and that shall not be an inferior track, just like Germany does and other countries that are doing economically well, because not every child is going to a 4-year college, but every child deserves a great education and a great career. And we can do that by giving technical training, because if we train our young people for technical skills, they can make a great income right out of high school. And I want to form more partnerships around the state between local employers, community colleges and high schools, design high school classes, course credit for job training to go right into great careers for 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. We can totally do that. One of my frustrations is as I travel Illinois, I talk to employers all over the state, and even though we have relatively high unemployment and low growth, I talk to companies and they say, Governor, I'm so frustrated. We got openings for 3 welders. I can't find any welders. I got openings for 12 maintenance technicians. I can't find any. Because our state isn't training our young people for those jobs. Other states are training them. And a lot of companies say, I'm out of here. I'm going to Indiana. They do it better over there. Or I'm going to other states where they do this. We got to have 2 tracks in education and equip everybody for a career. I believe in many of our communities with high unemployment, where gang violence is a problem and lack of opportunity is the core issue, and boy, do we have a lot of them in Illinois. We have, I won't belabor the point. We have a challenge. I believe if our young people in 8th and 9th grade saw that they could take classes and become welders rather than learning, algebra or whatever, they'll stay in school. Welders make 50 grand or more. That's a lot better than, that ain't minimum wage. We can have careers for everybody, and we can have a booming economy. Here's a simple fact. If Illinois' economy just grew at the national average, let's be average. If we grew at the national average over the last 15, I think the math was 17 years, if we just grew at the national average, nothing special. And I personally believe that if we did our reforms, all of our reforms, we would grow among the top 10 states. I personally believe that. I think we have the people and the resources to do it. We could be one of the fastest growing states in America. But if we just grew at the national average, today we would have a balanced budget. We would have no unpaid bills. We would not have needed the 2011 tax hike. And we'd have another $1 billion or $2 billion to put into our schools. From no increase in tax rates, just purely from growing Illinois' economy. Think about that. That's why the conversation has to change from just being about tax hikes or fewer programs to growth and government efficiency. And that's the way of the battle. So we're going to get a bit pro-business, pro-growth reforms. We're pushing. Education reform. We want to get political reform. I believe that everybody in the state should be able to vote on whether we have term limits on elected officials and whether we have redistricting reform so we can have bipartisan general elections. I believe we should have those votes. Big deal. And I hope President Obama talks about that tomorrow. I'm not sure that he will, but he's supported both of those in the past. He has. Clear study a few years ago and said, Illinois taxpayers, you pay over $500 million more in high taxes because of corruption in Illinois government. That's the budget. What if we put that $2 billion every year into schools? Holy cow. It's very budget related. Very budget related. And then we got to take on the government cost itself. You know what? I'm so honored to be part of the state government here. It's wonderful people in state government. I've been very, very pleased and proud. Many great people work in the state government. But the system is broken. The system is failing the employees and the taxpayers. And we've got to change it. So we're taking action. We can't wait for Speaker Madigan to be willing to talk about reform, so we're taking action. We're doing procurement reform. We've already streamlined operations, and we've cut over $500 million out of government costs already. We're going to take a lot more out. I go into every department I can as I'm traveling the state, and here in Springfield especially. I went into one department last year, and there were 200 people in the room with paper slowly moving from desk to desk. And I said, I heard they invented computers a couple years ago, and I think we could digitize this. When they said, well, there's some rules and process, and we got approval, and I don't know. And I said, well, we're going to get this done. What's the math on this? And they said, spend $500,000 on a computer system, $500,000, save $7 million a year. And that kind of structure is going on all over state government. We have a broken IT system in state government. Broken. We have software programs run in our state from 1974. Now, 74 was a great year. That's when I got out of high school, and it was a wonderful year. But software has come a long way since then, and we need to change the system. And here's where we lead on what's bad, and with their bottom what's good. We are the third highest spending state in America on IT. We spend a ton on IT. We're among the bottom couple states for digital services delivered. We're at the bottom on results, top on cost. Let's be average. Let's be average. We can do this. We're going to change the system. So we brought in somebody from Cisco Systems, a computer expert, and we're going to consolidate all the IT. We have every department basically in state government has its own IT department, and they virtually don't really coordinate. We have hundreds of financial accounting and reporting systems in state government. They don't talk to each other. It takes over a year to do an audit for Illinois, and there's hundreds of millions of audit errors. It's broken. And it costs a ton to maintain this ancient software. We're going to change that. And then the procurement system in Illinois, oh my goodness. I mean, it takes a year to get some sort of new buying effort going. It's just broken. Layers of bureaucracy and multi-regulations and rules and different people checking. Oh, I don't know how any vendor does business with the state. It's amazing. We believe we can save over $500 million per year by getting our procurement reworked. That's a lot of money for our schools, a lot of money for our developmentally disabled, a lot of money for our veterans who need our support. We should put the money where it belongs, not in this bureaucracy. So I've said to AFSCME, we need to change the structure. Our work rules are punishingly restrictive. The bumping rules, very hard to hire the right people. And, it's arguable it's probably a good thing. We have the highest state paid employees in America. I want our state employees paid well. We could argue whether they should be the highest, but, I want them to be paid well. And I want people to make more in the future. But they should be paid more based on productivity and saving taxpayer money. I'd love to give people a 5% of every dollar they save with an idea. That could be a lot. And boy, do our state employees have good ideas for saving money. They got a ton. And a lot of the employees love that idea, but the union leaders, no, none of that. And even though our state employees are very, very generously compensated, AFSCME has said, Governor, we want $3 billion more in compensation in the next 4 years. Or we'll strike. And I said, wow, I hope you don't strike. Please don't. I don't want you to. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I will pay more, but it's on incentive and merit and taxpayer savings. They said no. I said, well, that's what we're going to do. And we worked out that exact deal with every other union, except AFSCME. Well, almost every other. We're close on a couple others. And so AFSCME said, well, geez, no governor's ever said no to us like that before. In either party, by the way. They're used to totally getting their way. And I wanted a fair contract. I want our employees treated well with respect and good compensation and good retirement, but it's got to be reasonable for taxpayers. But AFSCME said, well, no governor's ever negotiated like this with us before. You're supposed to be scared if we threaten to strike. And I said, I'm not scared. It's my job to represent taxpayers. And you have the right, and I respect it, to strike if you choose. That is your right, and I respect that. But I have the right to negotiate on behalf of taxpayers. I have that right. And frankly, I have that moral duty. This is not my money. This is your money. And they said, well, we don't like that, Governor. They went to Speaker Madigan and said, get the governor out of these negotiations. He's too tough. And bring in a labor arbitrator from the, with a union background, and he'll give us what we want. Holy cow. You kidding me? They're taking me away from my ability to do my job. They passed that bill. I vetoed it. And then one Democrat in the House didn't vote to override my veto. One. And that saved you about $800 million a year right off the top. And you know what really frustrates me is many of the Democrats privately would admit that was a terrible bill and bad policy. They know it, but they voted for it anyway because the Speaker wanted it. And one of our challenges in the structure is former Governor Blagojevich wanted a lot more money and support from AFSCME. So he went to AFSCME and said, I'll give you and the union, I think it was 4% annual raises. I'll give you big raises. Anybody in the state government who doesn't join AFSCME, no raises. Forced them to get into the union, even if they didn't want to. That, I'm sorry, that is morally wrong. I'm sorry. It is morally wrong. But he did that, forced people into the union. Now we have the most unionized state government in America. And our union employees make more money than the supervisors and managers do. And I can't recruit executives and managers. It's a broken system. It's not fair. It's not fair to the good employees who know it's wrong, and it's not fair to taxpayers. And we've got to deal with this. We've got to be honest about what's going on. Our people of Illinois deserve so much better than this. So we're battling. We're working hard. We want to be reasonable and fair, treat everybody with respect, but we need some balance in the state government. In the meantime, we're trying to move forward. So try to enlist the business community. We need to recruit more companies to Illinois. So we formed a not-for-profit corporation. It's funded by business community, not taxpayers. It's controlled by the business community. It's going to have a business board, and it's going to travel the world. The people in that board, in that company, are going to travel the world recruiting companies to come to Illinois, offering them incentives and coming to creative packages. But all that will be subject to approval by me and the Department of Commerce. So they can't commit anything from taxpayers, but they can go out and travel and sell and negotiate very creatively. And I want the best business development professionals in the world working for Illinois to recruit companies here, because we will do great. Companies want to come to Illinois. And we've been woeful in our marketing. And we can do, I did it by executive order, and we're out there right now taking action, and the business community is very supportive. And other states have done this, and it can have a big impact. So we're going forward with that. We also need more infrastructure. I want to be a big advocate for building out our infrastructure. We're going to push it really hard. We don't have the money right now. We don't have a budget, which is stunning. But we need to move ahead. So we're going to form public-private partnerships to finance expansion of bridges and roads. We're starting with the Stevenson Expressway, I-55, which I travel extensively, and which is it's a bottleneck on our economic development because truckers can't get through to their goods and services, and it's hurting our economic growth and our competitiveness. And also it's hurting our commuters and our commute time. So what we're going to do is build new lanes, but not taxpayer funded 100% by the private sector, and allow flexible managed tolling in the new lanes. The existing lanes will stay as they are, totally free, but the new lanes will have a toll that at 3 a.m. when there's no cars, tolls will be whatever, 0. But when it's packed and you're moving at 2 inches an hour, you can pay $3, $2.50, I don't know, and zip right through. And people can choose. Pay $3 and get where you're going fast, or go sit over there. No cost to taxpayers, improve our competitiveness, shorten the commute, and people get where they need to go. And we can do that. Other states have done it, and it's been effective. And we need more jobs in our low-income communities, in our minority neighborhoods. We need better schools and more jobs in our communities, especially those with low income, lack of opportunity, and where we have these violent crimes and kids turning to gangs because they don't see a future for themselves. We need jobs in the communities and better schools. And one of the things we're doing, I want to empower minority entrepreneurs to build businesses in their communities. And I don't want to do it through big taxpayer-funded programs. I just don't think that works. But what minority entrepreneurs don't have access to that I had access to and that I provided to other entrepreneurs is a network of advisors, introductions in finance, to board members, to executive managers, to consultants. Minority entrepreneurs aren't in that network. They don't have any way to get in that network, and that network is key to success if you're going to start a successful business. So we're going to create that network. It's being led by a super talented African-American entrepreneur who built a great business and sold it, and he's now working for DCEO, and he's already recruited a dozen business executives who are going to be advising entrepreneurs starting in Peoria, Rockford, and Chicago initially, but then we're going to roll it out all around the state, and to help a dozen entrepreneurs or so every year get their businesses going and get access to money and executive talent. It's a big deal. I think we can really move the needle in a lot of communities if we get this network going, and no cost to taxpayers. So, and we're doing a lot of other initiatives too. We got to move the ball forward, despite this budget impasse. And I hope we'll get this impasse corrected soon. I don't know, really there's no excuse. In private, many Democrats say they know we need reforms, but they won't say it publicly yet. I do give credit to one state representative who a couple weeks ago, she stuck her neck out and she said publicly, we should have significant reforms be part of the budget negotiation. I thank her for saying that. She's a Democrat, and not many Democrats are saying that. Even they say it in private, not in public. We need bipartisan reform. I hope President Obama will talk about bipartisan compromise tomorrow. I hope he won't say, hey, do it in Springfield the way we do it in Washington, D.C. I hope he doesn't say that. But we need bipartisan reform, and we need to stay strong to get it. So we will do that. Bless you. Thank you. It's great to be home back in Springfield. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for those of you who are business builders. Thank you for building businesses in Illinois. I'll try to make it a lot better for you so you can be more successful and more competitive. And we'll try to get money into our schools so we have the best in America. We'll get the money where it should be in our human services, done efficiently and effectively, so we can support our most vulnerable. I believe you can judge any society by how well it takes care of its most vulnerable. We have a moral duty to do that, and I believe that very strongly. So thank you all very much. So we do Q&A? We do Q&A?
I'm back. Well, thank you, Governor. A tremendous breadth of activity that's going on, and I know that for representing my members of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, we are very, very supportive of your efforts. The real turnaround at the agency level is very noticeable. We go from an economic development agency that would be hard to get a phone call returned, frankly, to one that is, they're everywhere, they're out there. And we know you've got real challenges, but I just want to let you know that from the chamber standpoint, we're very, very supportive, and we're already seeing it at the agency level, and we cannot wait until the legislature gets into the game and helps out as well. So the chamber, and some of you submitted some questions, so we're going to go ahead and hop into those if you've got those submitted ahead of time. So the first one you alluded to, President Obama, he's going to be here tomorrow. What do you talk about when you're with the president?
Well, I hope we have a chance for a good conversation. I actually invited him to come over to Obed's. That's where I have a dinner a lot of nights. So I'm a big craft beer guy. I consume more than my share of craft beer. But the president indicated his schedule may not allow that conversation, but I am going to meet him at the tarmac at the airport, and we're going to visit a little bit. I really do hope he talks about bipartisan reform and how important it is bipartisan compromise, and I do hope he talks about redistricting reform and term limits. That's a big deal. That would be wonderful if he would. I don't know. We'll see what we can talk about. But I've known President Obama for a long time, since he was a state senator. Actually, many members of his administration are good personal friends of mine. Penny Pritzker, Commerce Secretary, is a good friend of mine. Arnie Duncan, Secretary of Education, close personal friend of mine. I hope we can work together and come up with some answers on getting things done.
A little just change of pace. A lot of members want to know, is the state of Illinois going to bail out the Chicago public schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is absolutely not. So Chicago Public Schools is it's a tragic situation. The school system has been mismanaged educationally and financially for years. And Chicago Public Schools was run as a patronage operation. Hundreds of millions of dollars would go to costs that were really more politically motivated than they were educationally motivated. and promises were made to the teachers union, and then they weren't honored, and the pensions weren't funded. And it's a broken system. And when I look at the math on Chicago Public Schools, I only see two real scenarios. One is massive property tax hikes on the people of Chicago in the coming few years, massive, that will be crushing for homeowners and small business owners, or bankruptcy and a reorganization. That's only the two scenarios that I see. There is a third scenario that the mayor is advocating, and that is a state bailout, covered by massive borrowing in the meantime, and that's not going to do that. The mayor has said, send $500 million from the state, we deserve it, and then leave me alone. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. I work for all the people of Illinois, and we're not going to have Illinois taxpayers bailing out the city of Chicago from your mismanagement. Now, I do work for all the people in Chicago, just like I work for all the people in Springfield and all the people in Decatur and all the people in Peoria. I work for everybody in this state, and I work for everybody in Chicago, whether they voted for me or not, doesn't matter. I work for everybody in this state, and I want great schools in every community in Illinois. But we've got to get financial management in the proper structure and make affordable commitments to our teachers on pensions, et cetera. Now, the mayor is correct. He has rightly pointed out that Chicago is the only school district in the state that pays its own teacher pension cost. No other school district does that. Now, I frankly think Illinois is broken in that regard. I think that's one of the reasons we got the trouble we do. But he's correct. And Chicago, the normal cost of a teacher's pension in Chicago right now is about $175 million per year. Now, they haven't paid in for years, so the liabilities are actually ballooned way up. And the mayor said, Governor, you should pick that up. You have the moral duty to pick it up. Treat us like you treat others. And I said, oh, well, Mayor, I will talk about that in a spirit of compromise and equity. That said, Mr. Mayor, you got to talk publicly about something that you're refusing to publicly acknowledge, and that is Chicago for years. And by the way, Chicago has for 100 years handled its own teacher pension. This is not a new deal. And this isn't a crisis that got created because of that structure. It's because they've financially mismanaged it to now. That's why. But I've said, Mr. Mayor, I will talk about that in the spirit of compromise and equity. However, you've got to publicly acknowledge Chicago gets $600 million a year more than other school districts do based upon its student population and its poverty. That's true. And frankly, if we did what's the right thing, we would maybe pick up the teacher's pension in Chicago, but get rid of that $600 million. We'd save a couple $100 million a year for Illinois taxpayers. But the mayor goes, no, I want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. Just send $500 million. No, we're not doing that. So I don't know where it goes. What we've got to do is protect the taxpayers. We've got to do is protect the students. We've got to protect the students. And other school districts have gone bankrupt. And bankruptcy can allow the teachers to keep their jobs. I don't believe any teacher in Chicago should have to lose his or her job. That should never happen. That should not be necessary. We're one of the few states that doesn't allow bankruptcy as an option. Other states have that option. You watch the conversations on the contract negotiations get more realistic if that was an option. Get way more realistic real fast. But in Illinois, we don't allow that. We just say, you got to raise taxes. That's your only option. Well, that's not fair to taxpayers if the politicians have cut a deal with the union to get political support in exchange for a good deal. That's broken. It's a conflict of interest. We also have had a law in Illinois for years that if a school district gets financially in trouble and mismanaged, the state can step in and correct it. We've had that law for years, and the state has stepped into 7 school districts, I think, so far. North Chicago, East St. Louis, several others. But, like usual, Chicago got a special deal. Chicago, that's not an option. It applies to every school district except Chicago. I've said, how about we treat Chicago like every place else? We're one state, not 2 states, and give the state the ability to step in if we need to protect Illinois taxpayers and have bankruptcy be an option. It's totally reasonable. Other states have done it. Nothing unreasonable about it. So far they go, oh, and the teachers union boss down there says, oh, he's a madman. Come on. Look, can we be a little bit rational here? Can we talk about really what's going on and protect the students and the taxpayers? We can do this. And I believe we're going to have to get there because Chicago's just showing a complete lack of backbone. And I'm very frustrated with the mayor. I've known him for 25 years. We've been friendly for a long time. I'm very frustrated with him because he caved in the teacher strike 4.5 years ago. Totally caved. And if a politician won't stand up to a taxpayer-funded opponent that has a lot of political muscle, the taxpayers always lose. That's not fair. There's got to be a balance of power. Right now, we don't have balance in Illinois. We need a balance between taxpayers and the insiders that are funded by the taxpayers. We don't have that today. We need to, that's what the turnaround's largely about, balance. People say I'm anti-union. I'm not anti-union. Join a union, terrific. My grandfather's a big union guy. I got no problem. But don't get into a conflict of interest where you can have union money, give a ton to a politician, and then say, then let's negotiate after I've just gotten you elected and given you millions of dollars. That's a conflict of interest, ladies and gentlemen. We don't allow businesses to do that. Why do we allow taxpayer-funded groups to do that? It's a conflict. I'm sorry, it is. It's not debatable. And we've got to deal with that balance of power. That's at the core of the issue. It's not anti-union. Terrific. Unions have done a lot of good things in this state and around America. Equal pay for equal work, workplace health, workplace safety, fairness. I'm all in. Great. But we got to have balance. We've got to have balance, and we don't have that right now. And that's the key.
Very good. I know you're a big supporter. You talked a lot about education. One of your agenda items is to freeze property taxes. I've had some of our businesses, frankly, that are very supportive of their local schools, express a little concern out of that. But I know you've got not just a freeze, but a more comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
I'd like you to speak to that.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Property taxes are our #1 tax problem in Illinois. We have basically, we're tied with New Jersey, and I don't want to be tied with New Jersey on anything, but we're tied with New Jersey on the highest property taxes in America. It's our #1 most uncompetitive tax, and it's crushing to our working families, our homeowners. It's crushing. And a lot of small business owners have told me they moved to Tennessee or Texas because of our property taxes. They tell me this. I'm not making this up. It's a big deal. So we got to deal with property taxes. What I've said, to shock the system, I have supported a property tax freeze. Now I'm open to announcing it, but then delaying it for 2 or 3 years to let everybody get ready for it. That's fine. But what the real answer to a long-term property tax relief is not just a freeze, it's to empower local communities to get control on their costs. That's the key. Because right now we got all these unfunded mandates, we have all these restrictions, and I believe each community and each school district should be able to decide the costs around outside contracting, construction costs, and construction bidding, and collective bargaining. When people say, oh, you're just right to work, it's not right to work. It has nothing to do with right to work. And when some people say to me, well, you're just trying to strip away collective bargaining. No, I'm not. I just want to do what Chicago has done and Massachusetts has done and others when it's necessary to protect taxpayers, give the ability for you in each community to take something out of collective bargaining if it's necessary. Chicago has done this for years, and when the Democratic supermajority says to me, Governor, you proposed that's a violation of our core beliefs. Well, that's baloney. You've done it for Chicago for years. You've taken school day out of collective bargaining, length of school year out of collective bargaining, outside contracting out of collective bargaining, and right now the mayor has asked that the teacher's pension contribution get taken out of collective bargaining. Why does Chicago get that and Springfield doesn't get that? Decatur doesn't get that. Peoria doesn't get that. What's going on? It's not fair. We should treat everybody the same in Illinois. And the communities that love strong teachers union, terrific. I got no problem. Collectively bargain everything. Got no problem. I'm not saying you can't. But I'm saying if in order to financially survive or protect taxpayers, you need to take something out of collective bargaining and just do it, you should be able to do that. It's your school. It doesn't belong to Chicago or state government. It belongs to you. You're the taxpayer of it. It's your kids in your community. Same thing on construction costs and outside contracting. If we do that and then put a lid on property taxes with that, we will quickly, and by the way, increase state support for education so we don't overly rely on local property taxes like we do now. If we do all those things, our property tax burden is going to come down a lot in the future years, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I think time for one more. So you're resident of Winnetka, but obviously living down here in the mansion, as you said you would.
Yeah.
You and I had the opportunity to enjoy a stag beer recently. So other than
I was
stag
impressed
beer,
that you're willing to drink it with me.
other than stag beer, what is your favorite thing about spending time in Central Illinois?
Oh, you know what? I love it. Springfield is such a great community, and to me, it's such a privilege to live in the governor's residence. I love it. My dogs especially love it because they got free roam of the yard. But, and now it's really nice because when it rains, the plaster doesn't fall on me anymore on the stairs. That's a big deal. Really, my wife is so much happier now. I'm here about 3/4 of my time, and I'm up in the Chicago area about 20%, and then I'm around the state the other 5 or 10%. You know what I love about this community? And my grandparents lived in a little double-wide trailer. They were corn farmers in Whitewater, Wisconsin. I like the life in a smaller community. People know each other. I get to hunt, and I love to hunt. I love to fish. Around here, it's good, very good. I love to ride my Harley. It's great here. And life is good. And I love high school basketball. I love skating in the hockey rink. I used to play hockey 50 years ago. Life is great here, and I've gotten to know a lot of friends. I've gotten to know a lot of farmers around the neighborhood here. It's great. I'll tell you quickly a story. One of the most emotional events of my governorship. It's going to sound a little corny, but it's a big deal to me. I was at a high school basketball event, a game last winter, almost a year ago. And I was, doing high fives and selfies with some of the kids and whatever, and 2 teachers came up to me, and they started to cry. And oh, what did I do? I'm sorry. What did I say? And they were crying, and they said, Governor, you are healing a wound in this community that you have no idea, that you're here, that you're with us. I started to cry. And I said, I got to give a talk in a little bit. I can't do this. I mean, let's all, I said, look, I'm just trying to do my job. I'm just trying to do my job. This is the state capitol. This is where the governor should primarily be. And this is where the government should primarily be. And I'm just trying to do my job. And I appreciate your saying that. It means a lot to me. But you know what? To me, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege, it's an honor to work for you and the people of Illinois. And I'm doing this as a labor of love. You guys know I'm not taking a salary or a pension or anything. I'd rather the money go to our schools. And I'm doing this because I love Illinois. And it's hard. Oh boy. By 9:30 at night, I'm like, poof. And as I say, when I started this whole effort 3 years ago, I was 6'6" and had a full head of hair. Now I'm down to, I'm down to 6'3", and my hair's going fast, really fast. But I love the work. It's an honor. It's a privilege. God bless you all, and God bless the great state of Illinois. Thank you very much.
So, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our program, so thank you very, very much.
Everybody good? Give me a high sign. Are you good? You don't look great. Okay, great. All right. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. It's good to be back home here in Springfield. We've been traveling around the state, Evelyn and I, discussing bringing all the communities up to date on our efforts to reform the government. It's frustrating to us, outrageous that we don't have a state budget yet. We're going to talk about that more next week in our address. We've gone almost 8 months now without a budget. It's unconscionable. People are being hurt by this, and we've got to take action. And we are explaining what we need to do and why. So far, Speaker Madigan and the majority in the legislature have refused to do any reforms. They passed an unbalanced budget, and they've refused to vote on a tax hike to pay for it. So I've said to the Speaker, I will work on tax reform and new revenue, but we need to do reforms. So far, he's refused. So I've said, Speaker, vote for a tax hike, get it done, or work with us. It's got to be one or the other. You can't have you do an unbalanced budget and not do the taxes. So that's the battle. The Speaker so far wants the discussion to be either higher taxes or fewer services, and I say that's not the choice. Let's do faster economic growth and less government waste and bureaucracy. Will free up billions to put into our schools and our human services. That needs to be the conversation, and that's what our reforms are all about. Bringing down the cost curve of government and growing our economy more quickly. If we were just an average growing state instead of one of the worst growing states, average growing over the last 15, 17 years, we wouldn't have a budget deficit, we wouldn't have unpaid bills, we wouldn't have had the need for a tax hike in 2011, and we'd have money for our schools. We need to grow, and we need to shrink the cost of government. And that's what Evelyn and I are talking about here today.
Well,
questions? Yes.
Excuse me if this sounds blunt, but you called this unconscionable. You said it's outrageous that we're here. You say you're waiting on Speaker Madigan, but are you so powerless as governor that you can only stand here and wait for Speaker Madigan?
Well, I can't, first of all, I can't unilaterally raise taxes, and I won't unilaterally raise taxes, and I can't pass a budget. Only the legislature can pass a budget. I can make recommendations. The legislature passes a budget. And they have a supermajority, and they've overridden my veto in the past. They could pass a tax hike if they wanted to. They don't want to. The Democrats know that only doing a tax hike isn't either the right answer or politically popular. They just want to try to force me to do it, and I'm not going to do that. So we got to stay the course.
Governor, Democrats we spoke with today say they don't believe that whatever President Obama says tomorrow will make much of a difference towards solving the budget crisis. You take that view?
I hope they're wrong. I don't know. I'm not sure what the president will say. I'm excited. It's an honor to have him in Springfield. I look forward to his address, and I hope that he has some inspirational words and advice. We'll see what he says.
In the few minutes you'll probably have with him alone, what do you intend to bring up?
Well, President Obama and I share passion around education. I want to talk about a little bit about education policy with him. And his education director, secretary, is a good friend of mine who I've worked with for years, Arnie Duncan. I am primarily going to focus on his thoughts on how we get compromise. He, as a leader of the Democratic Party, how can I work with the Democratic legislature, get his advice? How can I bring Democrats around to getting reforms? And given that he has supported term limits and he's supported redistricting in the past, does he have any advice on how I could work with Democrats to implement some of that? And we'll see what he says.
But Governor, you almost make it for the agenda.
It's a huge loss for Illinois. I worked hard for months, and Mayor Emanuel worked hard for months to recruit GE to come, and that would have been a huge coup for the state of Illinois. And it's tragic that even though they wanted to be here, we didn't get them. That's a major loss for the people of Illinois.
So you're ready for good news. You're ready for good news today. You're not tired of saying how bad Illinois is. You're ready for a good story.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I'm out there selling Illinois every day. I'm trying to recruit companies all the time. I spend a lot of my time trying to recruit businesses to come here. And I've got many who've said they want to come, but they want to see that we're going to have a financially responsible state and where there's a balance of power between insiders and government and taxpayers. That's what they want to see, and that's what our agenda is about. Because right now, and this is what many of your viewers and readers need to understand. We haven't had a balanced state budget in Illinois for 30 years, maybe 40 years. I haven't looked actually 40, but I've gone more than 20, 25. We've never had a balanced budget. And the business community looks at that and goes, why would I build major infrastructure and new factories or new businesses in Illinois if Illinois is just financially reckless and irresponsible? And when we don't pay in the pensions the actuarial amount, like we started to do decades ago, that is borrowing at 8%. And businesses know it. Politicians don't admit to it, but we've got to change that if we're going to build out our businesses and recruit companies. And if we grew our economy, we will solve our budget problems.
Governor,
Can I do her?
You went on the turnaround tour a year ago. It's been a year, your reforms still aren't passed. What are you hoping to get out of this new tour around the state of calling for more reforms?
Well, we're just updating everybody. We're trying to get the word out so everybody understands what we're doing. And what we've started with our initial group of reforms. A bunch of those we've taken off the table in the spirit of compromise. And now what we've done is bring additional reforms that we think are much easier to pass. Procurement reform, Thompson Center sale, and consolidation of government units that can save billions. And we hope those will be easier to pass than the first round. What we will never do is give up. We just have to stay persistent because change is hard.
If you pass some of these reforms, then can we get a budget, or do the turnaround agenda items still have to be passed before the budget?
Well, we need, again, I've never said any one thing has to be in or out of a compromise, but we need a grand compromise. If we're going to look the taxpayers of Illinois in the eye and say we're going to ask more of your hard-earned money, I have to be able to say to them, we all should have to say to them, you are getting great value for your money, and you're going to have higher incomes in the future and more jobs in the future if we're going to ask for that.
Governor, Eastern Illinois University has joined now hundreds other colleges that have had to lay off hundreds of staff members.
Yeah, it's
the
tragic.
layoffs are going to be effective in the middle of March if there's not a budget. Does this put any more emphasis to get something done soon? Because these layoffs at EIU will be permanent in the middle
Every
of March.
bit of suffering in the state, which has been going on for 7 months, is a tragedy. It's outrageous. And there's more that's developing. It's just unconscionable. We have got to focus. And the House hasn't even come into session really to work.
Why not call them in? Call them in.
You know what? That was tried by other governors, and forcing 4-leader meetings was tried by other governors. It doesn't work. What they should do is their job. They should be in here passing a budget. They passed 500 bills last year. They wouldn't vote on a tax hike. They wouldn't vote on term limits. They wouldn't vote on redistricting reform. They wouldn't vote on workers' comp reform. They wouldn't vote on real property tax relief. They're voting on, you know, and I love pumpkin pie, but you know what? We need to focus on the priorities, and the legislature is not doing it, and they haven't even come into session to debate the reforms, and they know that, and many of their members know that we need reforms as part of a budget, and they're just not doing their job.
So how do you
Some of those bills that they passed were budget bills, and as Speaker Madigan has said many times when he's been here in front of the media, you could use your veto pen to balance those budget bills if you feel that needs to be done. Why not do that and get a budget in place for FY16 so we can move forward with 2017?
Because we have had unbalanced budgets for decades. And if all we do is a little veto or a little bit of a tax hike and don't change the cause of the deficit spending, we won't fix the problem, and we won't have balanced budgets in the future. We got to get the structural reasons for these deficits. That's the whole key. Only doing a little bit of cutting and raising without reforms will not solve our problems. You can just look back at the last 30 years and see this is not a short-term problem. The structure is causing the deficits. Thanks very much, everybody.
Good job, Governor.